We feel that motorists across the country are getting a pretty hard time at the moment. They're being whacked with unfair charges from ulez to these low traffic neighbourhoods. And we are calling on politicians to remember the motorist and to think about coming up to the next election. These guys, it's 30 million drivers in the UK, cars on the UK roads, and essentially to remember that in the push for green, which we do support our move towards net zero, but we think that the government needs to remember they have to bring people with them on this journey towards electric cars, electric vehicles, and a green future, and not remember that people are really being whacked in a cost of living crisis already. And we think they should be doing all they can to try and ease the burden on ordinary people. So the main aims of the campaign are firstly on ulez. We are calling for that not to be expanded across London. It's meant to be done so at the end of August. Sadiq Khan, the London Labour Mayor of London, is pushing ahead with those plans because he feels that he's got no choice to do so to meet environmental targets. We want that to be looked again. Low traffic neighbourhoods as well. We say no to those if the public objects to them. A lot of them were pushed on the public during COVID, and we want essentially public consent for these low traffic neighbourhoods. If people want them in their local areas, they should be allowed to go ahead. But if people object, we think that government should take that seriously. The other thing that we are looking at is the petrol and diesel car ban, which is meant to come into place from 2030. It means that you won't be able to buy a new petrol or diesel car in just a few years' time. We want government ministers to look at that again. We think that they are going a little bit too quickly on some of these promises in an attempt to try and meet net zero. Other countries like America and the EU have slightly later dates. We think that should be taken into consideration. The other thing that is currently a live discussion in government at the moment is a new target for 22% of all cars to be electric vehicles. That's meant to come in at the start of the year in January 2024. Essentially, there is a discussion in government about whether that should go ahead right now. There are some predictions from the Society for Motor Manufacturers saying that they're not quite sure that even 22% of cars will actually be electric cars by that time anyway. So we feel that because the price of electric cars is so expensive, the government should consider that in the round. And just generally no more new stealth taxes on motorists. At the moment, they are being whacked at the pumps. Pump prices are still very high despite having dropped. And fuel duty has been frozen after the Sun's campaigning on it for a very long time. And we want politicians to stick to that promise. But this has definitely become a talk of Westminster. Lots of people mentioning it today. Lots of politicians getting on board. Already 43 MPs last week wrote a letter to the government urging them to slow down on this 2030 car ban. Many of them have jumped on board our campaign today. We've been speaking with MPs, including Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary, who is on board with us. Lord David Frost, the former chief Brexit negotiator, is also on board. And MPs from across the political spectrum. Labour have also given us a little bit of a nod, saying that we completely believe that drivers need to be given a bit of a break, essentially, during this cost of living crisis. And I spoke to Rachel Reeves last week about ulez. They acknowledged that it is something that has really been hurting them, the polls, including at this by-election. And she doesn't think it's the right time to slam new charges on motorists either. This is definitely going to be an election issue for both the Conservatives and for Labour. Net zero is a target that's been put into law, but essentially now is the really tricky bit for politicians. They've got to figure out how it's going to work. And obviously, during a cost of living crisis, it's really, really, really difficult to make the argument that we should be putting these new charges on people. It's really obviously very difficult for ministers and for the government to try and sway the market towards these new electric cars, which obviously are growing in popularity and more people are buying them. There's a variety of good sides to them, but at the moment, the main downside is the fact that they are incredibly pricey. And even if you're thinking about buying a new car tomorrow, the fact is that they are so much more expensive than petrol and diesel cars. So I think this issue isn't going away for either party. We know that the environment, as we come up to net zero by 2050, which is the current legally obligated timeline that the government have signed into law, they cannot move that back unless they completely rewrite the law. It's definitely going to be an issue for both parties. They're going to have to say how they are going to make sure that we go green, but without hammering voters and supporters in the process. I think it's fair to say that our readers are really interested in this topic. Many people outside of London, especially our readers, many of them do have cars. As soon as you go outside the big cities, you really do need a car to travel around. And there are lots of cities that are pressing ahead with these low traffic neighbourhoods, 20 mile an hour speed limits, and other similar ulez style schemes to try and push down emissions in city centres. So it's something that's affecting people all over the country. It's definitely not just a London issue with ulez. Other similar schemes are in operation in other major cities. But yes, Britain is a country of many people who drive cars. And obviously that lots of people are thinking about when their next car is going to be and thinking about this ban and thinking, how am I going to be able to afford a new electric car? Why should I be paying £12.50 fees to go and visit my parents just down the road, or go to the hospital, or pick my kids up from school? I think everybody agrees that we will need to do more to combat the challenges of climate change, to look after the environment and to leave a better planet for our kids. I think everybody is agreed on that. But what we are really saying to the government today is to look at the strength of support from drivers, and remember that if you are essentially forcing more costs onto these people during a cost of living crisis, it's really going to hurt you at the ballot box.